For the last 3 months now, I've been building these mega break instruments over on Patreon, and they've been going down really well, so I thought I would just show you a little bit more of what I've been working on for this month. And we've done the Amen, the Think break, and now this is the Hotpants break. And each one of these ones, and as I kind of experiment more with building these instruments, lends itself towards a slightly different type of processing. And I've just been kind of really delving deep and seeing how far I can take what is essentially like a 2-bar or a 4-bar drum loop, and then turning it into, I think this month had 73 different chops of the break in. And so I've got sort of lo-fi chops and phasey ones, and then I've been doing time stretching the Akai and just so many different kind of permutations of the break that obviously I give you all the stuff so you can just do classic roller style chopping. Then if you want to be more experimental, there's loads of fun stuff to play with in these break instruments. And then I've been translating them to all these different DAWs, so Ableton and Bitwig, and then I've been doing them on the Digitact. So you can kind of use these everywhere, hopefully, is the idea, and everyone can have access to them. So to start with, I basically, if I go through my process a little bit, I've got the Hotpants break at just the original speed here, and I think I even ran this through the EMU, so I've been doing lots of resampling through my hardware just to get a bit of the colour of the kind of the Akai and the EMU onto the breaks. So we just got the kind of starting point of a perfect 2-bar chop of the break, I think this is, and the first step I would usually do actually is to kind of warp this to 168 beats per minute. So the next thing to do, and probably one of the most important steps with your breaks, is to EQ them. And I sometimes just do this with like a 3-channel kind of old school mixer EQ, a bit like if anyone has SIEQ by Sound Toys. Just one like this where you're generally like pulling away a little bit of the muddy frequencies in the mid-range, so like dipping the mid-range a bit and then boosting the top, maybe boosting or cutting the low end depending on the break. But obviously each break needs a slightly different EQ, and I think for this one I actually went for more of a kind of parametric style EQ. And I'm always looking at these muddy frequencies here. I've actually built in FabFilter now a couple of different kind of EQs that I've been using for breaks, but this one I think works really well, just aiming at all these muddy frequencies in the low end. You can hear there's almost some resonances coming through without this EQ, which sound a bit like wind noise, like a sort of noise in there. And then apart from that, the process pretty much all goes through resampling into the Akai and running it through the desk and just creating saturation and clipping and sample rate reduction. But with the Hotpants, one of the things that always really annoys me about this break is the sibilance on the tambourine can be quite jarring. So I have this one which you can hear all that kind of bright top end in there, which sometimes you do want because it adds energy. But what I also did was through sample rate reduction, so this trick essentially where you take a break, you have it at this original speed, and then I would pitch it up kind of 12 semitones or more generally, and then record it into the Akai pitched up and then pitch it back down. What that does is it adds a little bit of grit and kind of colour from the Akai, and it filters through the anti-aliasing filter, which is relative to the pitch interpolation method in the Akai. It filters some of the top end out, and so you have a grittier and more filtered version of the break. And so what I did actually in this pack, if I show you in this is like the part of the kind of folder that comes with the pack, is I have different versions of the Hotpants, and then I have I pitched it up to different amounts, so you can hear what happens when you pitch it up 12 semitones or all the way up to 17. So I'll just show you very quickly. That's 12. And you can hear jumping to 14. It instantly like clears up all that harsh kind of top end in the with the tambourine. And then you can hear 17 has brought back like some weird sort of frequencies as well now, where you've reduced it so much it's creating artifacts and stuff like that. So there is usually a sweet point with breaks you have to find in terms of this pitch amount. I've been experimenting with it so much. Each break I'll just sort of try from plus 12 to plus 20 sometimes to just see where the kind of the best place is, or where the breaks sound the best resampling in this way. So I love that technique, and that was really the foundation of the break. So I have the break with all of these kind of the tambourine in, but actually I kind of set this one up. So if you look at this instrument, I have this lo-fi version as well, where the shuffles and the kind of longer slices of the break, I have the identical version of the break in lo-fi format. And what that means is you can just pitch this up. If I can just pitch up till I find this kick again. So if I pitch up here, I can access the kick with and without the break, with and without this shuffly bit, which is awesome because just for like the intro you can have the one without the tambourine, and then you can bring it in for the drop, and it's just a really sort of handy to have this all in one instrument. Cool. So you've essentially got two versions of the Hotpants here with all of the shuffles as well individually. And then I've got long kicks where I showed in the last one, where you can manually extend the kick, and then I've spanned these up and down the keyboard along with the snares. And this is a big mono reverb on one of the snares, so you've got this cool, it sort of just rings out really well, and you can use that especially in renoise with like backwards commands and lots of cool tricks there. And then lots more mono kind of reverb versions of both the kicks and the snares. And then reverse hits. Got some rolls. Some of the snare rattles I did from the last one, I can put lots of these in again. Then these classic Akai Timestretch. And then this was what I really wanted to get to, was these phasey hits. Now you can obviously just put a phaser effect on your drum break and bounce this out and get something fairly similar to what I was doing, which sounds quite cool. But I went through a slightly different process, and I actually happened upon this by accident, where I was messing, just kind of testing out the breaks. And what I realized in Audio Finder, if you select two sounds at the same time, it actually just plays them on the left and right channel. And I was like, that sounds kind of cool and phasey as it is. So I hit record on Twisted Wave and recorded them in, and then I just selected this file and converted it to mono, and I got this really cool version of the break. So that was my starting point, and then I was like, maybe if I do this phase trick in the Akai and chuck this version in, I'll get some even more interesting results. Basically what happens on the Akai when you trigger a break at the same time, they slightly, because of the MIDI and the way it responds, they just don't play exactly at the same time. So you have a slight delay between the two notes, which you can just do in Renoise by offsetting the delay by a fraction in this second note. And you can achieve all of these kind of different sounding phases. So that's a good place to start. And if I come into this instrument, I made all of these, they just sound so good. Maybe it's just coming out of the Akai, they have a bit more grain or something in it, but I think in effects, here we go. That almost sounds like it's been time stretched just in the way it's phasing, but it's just using this trick, maybe with even more of a delay value. So you can achieve a very similar thing in renoise. But I also thought to slow down a break, you can either delay it so they're offset and they're playing at different times, or I thought maybe you could pitch it. And so I was manually sort of pitching this in the Akai. And the way I would set this up in renoise, I thought, is if I just duplicated the instrument. So you have the same instrument twice, but then on the second layer of the instrument, I would come to pitch and then put it on one semitone of a pitch range and then make an envelope and sort of see what happened if I kind of detuned the envelope whilst just triggering one note in here. And you can make some really cool like custom phase effects. And so maybe that's getting quite extreme there. If I fine tune this a little bit better, maybe starting fairly close. So that's almost the max it wants to go. But that sounds really satisfying to me. So you could probably even get a cooler result in renoise because you can use envelopes, but I was just doing this manually. So for the phasey effects, I chopped these up again. So you can play these, you'd be able to swap between like the main chops of your break, and then for one little snare kind of snare and shuffle passage, just swap to a phasey version. So I've tried to make it as useful as I possibly can, this break instrument, whilst having everything like synced up so it all works at 168 BPM. And then the last thing I did was do more of these lo-fi. So that's the idea, is to have everything you would ever want in a break kind of pre-prepared and ready to go at a specific BPM, which you can change by pitching it up and down the instrument. So I think these are cool. I'm wondering where I go next and how I expand this. I think next month I'm going to do the Apache break, which is a little bit more of a complicated break because of like the number of slices in it, and I'm going to have to just have a bit of a think of how I approach that one. So yeah, I've got another video planned this week, which I'll try and get onto in the next day or two. And then, yeah, lots more coming from me. I would love to do more on the Digitact and lots of ideas, like I said in the last one. So I'll catch you soon for that. Big ups. Bye.